For a Super Sunday in February, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, adoption ties up the General Assembly. There's fallout from that college football national championship game. And could there be rapid economic growth on the horizon? Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Super Sunday. Theron's here, Carrie Hichter sitting in for Phil Kent, Alexis to my right, which is the exact opposite of how it should be, correct?
That's all right. That's
but happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's be truthful. The week of the Super Bowl, for some reason, is a news-free week. It's usually the State of the Union, which is all national news. The Super Bowl is all national news. But everything seems to slow down the week of the Super Bowl. I could mention that we had the Grammy Awards, but that would be wrong. So
that wasn't national. That was
not on my radar. So it's just kind of strange. But let me offer you some hope. Just think, in another week and a half or so, pitchers and catchers report to Walt Disney, and the Braves will be underway. And our new Atlanta United soccer team is already practicing down in Florida. So there's hope. We can get rid of the cold and the flu. How about that?
That sounds like a good idea.
So here we are, left to discuss a very slow session at the state capitol. I'm amazed. I look at the daily report of bills on the floor, bills up for first read, bills in. It's a slow session. And Theron, I ask you, do idle hands make for mischief?
Well,
I mean, the fact is that guy Michael Williams, he's running for governor, he's a Republican. He takes to the floor and condemns Casey Cagle in really terms that were not suitable for a legislative body. And then you had David Schaefer, who's running for lieutenant governor, cleverly introduce a bill that sort of condemns the NFL. In the meantime, where's the legislation?
Well, here we go. I mean, you actually hit on something very important. Both of those two individuals that you just named are actually running for office. And always Alexis reminds us that it is election year. But what you're seeing going on in the Capitol, particularly in the Senate, there's a lot of posturing going on. And I want to commend Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle for doing his best to try to actually move the legislative process forward. But, you know, I think what you see is a lot of folks in the Senate are taking the well more often and earlier than they have in the past because
there's nothing on the floor.
Well, it's nothing on the floor.
But
and
they want the attention and spotlight.
And they want the attention and the spotlight. But I think that our legislators know that the people of Georgia want them to actually get some work done and to actually pass some bills. And so I know we're going to talk about the adoption bill a little later on, but I think that both chambers are figuring out a way to try to move forward together.
Well, let's first of all, I think I want to just quickly add that the bill condemning the NFL is an interesting one because David Schaefer is pretty clever. He doesn't condemn the NFL.
Right.
He condemns the NFL for not taking an ad asking the NFL to make players stand for the national anthem.
Right.
So it's a really convoluted thing, and I think everybody said, yeah, I can vote for that.
Yeah, that's why I got passed unanimously.
Yes, by veterans.
Yes.
There you go. So that was kind of fun. Again, on a slow day. So let's talk about that adoption bill. And I hope you all can straighten me out. I am confused. I know the troublesome provision in the state's overhaul of its adoption law is whether agencies, the religious agencies that engage in the important work of finding adoptions, can exercise their religious beliefs. Put simply, for example, refusing to place babies with homosexual couples of either side. I know that's the sticking point. I thought that had been done with, but it seems to me that the House just sent back to the Senate that same language. Is that right? Is that what I'm reading and seeing?
Go ahead.
Well, I think they inserted it, yes.
Reinserted
it,
yeah.
Which doesn't make no sense because the governor's not going to sign it. He vetoed it the last time, correct? And I also think that there is an issue about the payment for
the birth mother.
Yes. And so that has confused the issue as well because they're saying that could possibly lead to buying and selling babies.
And I thought that had been put under the supervision of a judge under family law, that if there are payments carried to, I don't know if you've ever done any family law.
Yes.
But my impression is that if there were to be expenses paid to the mother, they were to be common and ordinary expenses overseen by a judge.
Right. Well, one of the principal issues, as I understand it, the House passed the bill 168 to 0, and somebody took to the floor, I forget who it was, of the Senate when it came back to the Senate, and was focusing more on that aspect of things, because a lot of times the birth mother is going to have medical expenses, may very well require bed rest, be out of work, and she's going to be confronted with a situation oftentimes where she could go broke while she's waiting to come to term. And in that sort of situation, I think in many instances she may very well decide to terminate the pregnancy because she can't afford to go forward with it if she can't get financial help. So I would encourage the people who oppose this idea to think about that, because if their number one interest is preserving life, supporting the mother seems to me to be the best option.
And to Carrie's point is that the sentiment at the Capitol on Thursday afternoon, they were in session until late in the afternoon on Thursday. So when the House sent the unanimous bill over to the Senate, they were anxiously waiting for the Senate to act. And instead of acting and going with this bipartisan bill, the Senate decided to recess until the following Monday.
And they said they would read the bill over the weekend.
And they would read the bill over the weekend. So
no, they're watching the Super Bowl.
Right, exactly.
So the point is that there is a bipartisan effort around what do we do with the adoption bill, which we know has not been reformed in over 30 years. But the Senate has got to step up here. I mean, the House got together, they passed a bill that many Democrats and Republicans thought were fair, and then they decided to go home. So I think this is going to be top of the agenda on Monday and Tuesday at the beginning of the section next week.
All right, another topic that's a major import in the news is opioids, and Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle introduced a bill on Monday. I see lots of stuff on opioids. We've got lawsuits from rural areas against pharma providers. I'm assuming they'll come up with something on that. One thing the General Assembly is not touching on, and I'm going to save it for just a minute, is the national black eye Atlanta got with the National College Football Playoff game. And so we're going to take that up on our own when we come back. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Only a handful of news outlets have been on the case about the crowd overflow at the National College Football Championship game over the holidays. But I've tried to press it here on the Georgia Gang. A few other outlets have looked at it, and then, to my surprise, sort of out of the blue, the board of the World Congress Center brought it up at their meeting. They're a public agency, and apparently a couple of members of that board had stood outside Mercedes-Benz Stadium for 2 to 2.5 hours in the cold and the rain, fuming about why they couldn't get into the stadium. A lot of people, Carrie, I'll start with you. A lot of people at first bought the stadium people's explanation that, oh, well, this was just because of Donald Trump. You bring the president in, of course you get this. And we don't like Trump either. But anyway, there was that, and that the Secret Service took over. And I just wasn't buying it, because I saw a lot of video sent to me of that scene. And there were lots of gates, and closing one should not freeze the others.
Yeah, I understand that the Secret Service closed gate number 1, but there were multiple other gates that people were sitting outside of, unable to get in, that there were problems with people who had their tickets on their cell phones. Some people were standing out in the rain and their cell phones had problems as a consequence of that. Some people, surprise, surprise, had old Apples and their batteries went dead. So maybe Apple has some additional prospective liability from that.
You don't often see members of those boards, which are plum assignments, raising Cain. But the next part of it was, there was the public meeting, then there was another meeting, a follow-up meeting, which wasn't publicly announced. What do you think, Theron?
Yeah, and I think, I've talked to several members on the Georgia World Congress Center board, and this was a big problem. And a lot of these folks who I think raise issues, what's common is a lot of those guys, men and women, were Georgia fans. And so they were waiting for this opportunity to say, hey, how do we fix this in the anticipation that a year or so from now, we're going to be hosting the Super Bowl. Right. And so I think that one thing we always got to add, though, Dick, as a person who actually stood in line for an hour and a half, is that I do think the City of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, the police, safety, our safety officials, public safety officials, did encourage us to get to the game very early. But to Carrie's point is that we have to also understand whenever you have the President of the United States of America, whether he's a Democrat or Republican, is that they take extreme security measures. And while they did close down Gate 1, they couldn't let other people in at a certain particular time at other gates because the President had landed. And so I think, we just got to make sure that our viewers understand that. But listen, if we perform the way we perform at the gate during the Super Bowl, that's going to be a very, very bad situation for the city of Atlanta.
Well, we can't have that because the last time we had a Super Bowl here, we had a terrible ice storm, and we got a bad black eye.
Yep.
We can't control Mother Nature, but
they can control
Buffalo
access.
Bills and Dallas Cowboys. I was there.
Oh yeah, well you are a football fan then. I don't remember that. Good for you. Disturbing story that the I-team here at Fox 5 has been working, and I mean disturbing. It's kind of picking over old bones in the sense that it involves Candace Bird, who was Kasim Reed's executive chief of staff. Chief of staff. They got all titles for that sort of thing. But Dale Russell and the I-team tried for 6-7 months to get her travel records. That's an easy Freedom of Information request. That's not hard for government to provide you. I think in a city the size of Sandy Springs, you could probably get that in a week at the most, maybe just a couple of days by law. But Carrie, Candace Bird might have set some modern day travel records for a non-executive.
It was truly stunning. 30-something trips in 20-something months, over $200,000 worth of travel expenses for international and domestic travel to somebody who's making $238,000 a year already. The fact that they slow-rolled the production of those documents until after the Reid administration was gone from office tells us a lot about what they thought those records would show and how embarrassing they would be.
Yeah, and how do you defend that delay, Theron?
Well, it's not so much that you have to defend it. I think that Carrie left out some key facts.
Okay.
So let's make sure we put it all on the table. So number one, they did turn over all of the information, and it was an extensive amount of information that they reported.
Yeah.
I mean, so there was no information omitted. So that's number one.
It was a photo's guide to the world.
Yeah, but we got to make sure we're factual. They submitted all of the requests that they made. Secondly, is the credit card that the chief of staff has for the city of Atlanta is not just for that person who occupies the position. It's the credit card that's being used for the entire office of the mayor, but also the multiple departments that actually serve at the pleasure of the mayor that the chief of staff actually is in charge of running. And so when you look at these purchases, a lot of them were made because there were a lot of different events. There were a lot of different things that the office of the mayor had to do. And lastly, if you look at the places that Candace Bird traveled, these are places that are created partnerships with the city of Atlanta. And so there's roughly about—
The most expensive was Cape Town, South
Africa. But also there was roughly about 18 projects that I think that they were working on, the city of Atlanta, not Candace Bird or Mayor Reed, and they have been able to bring in over $1 billion in revenue to the city in these partnerships for these trips. And so while I think that it looks on the surface as very bad, but I think for our viewers, we have to understand that this was a credit card that she was not using for her own personal use. It was for the office of the mayor. It was for probably 10 other
really spell that out,
departments.
though, Theron. Alexis, you and I like music.
Yes.
Candace Bird, on her credit card, put $4,800 to bring the Howard University Choir down to Atlanta to sing at, I think it was Mayor Reed's last inaugural. Maybe it was an earlier one. I'm not sure on that. We have lots of great choirs. I know that the mayor went to Howard University.
Yeah, went to Howard, so they wanted to come down.
But what about the Morehouse College Glee Club? They're the best around.
They are very good, but I think that is an expedient way to finance the trip. I'm sure they had campaign funds to repay that. So,
but they didn't say that.
Well,
it's on the credit card, you know.
Well, I'm just saying that.
But we also got a report, Dick, that the State of the City address, back to my earlier point, this card was used for official city business. Right. And the Mayor Reed, has used the Glee Club, Morehouse, he's used Clark Atlanta universities in the past. But at his right, he has the opportunity to want to fly down the choir, and it was an official city event. And so I think that's one of the things that people missed in the story. And I think Dale spent a lot of time on this story.
But you know what? It's like the imperial presidency. It's like the blue lights. It's this feeling that we can do whatever we want to do. That's what concerns me.
It's always easier to spend when it's other people's money.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
All right, one other development in the Metro this week that didn't get a lot of attention, I think is very important. The very clear-minded mayor of Johns Creek, a fellow named Mike Bodker, this week issued a statement, kind of out of the blue, if you will, saying that he and his city do not want heavy rail or light rail in their part of North Fulton County. He doesn't even want bus rapid transit, and his reasoning, he says, is pretty simple, Carrie. He doesn't want any more density.
Right. Well, I imagine that the mayor of Johns Creek has an office in Johns Creek.
Yes.
So he probably doesn't spend a lot of time like the rest of us sitting in traffic. But seriously, a heavy rail is like a 40-year solution to a problem that may not be a 40-year problem. Rob Pitts in the last election was talking about autonomous cars a lot, these self-driving vehicles that apparently will solve a lot of our transit problems because they don't have accidents, they're much more efficient in the way they get you to and from places, and if they're on the road in 10 years, there may be a significant abatement of the traffic problem.
We got to get out, but Darren, I don't know, you know, all this talk about this regional transportation solution, we're making all this progress, and they're right in the heart of North Fulton County. Here's the mayor saying, not on my watch.
This is very strange. Mayor Bacher is a person who, you know, loves the show. I see him around town often, and I just got to say he's one of my favorite Republicans, but he's just backwards on this one. I mean, to Carrie's point, you know, Johns Creek, that area, they are probably the people who utilize the North Point MARTA station, 400 MARTA station more than anyone. And so I think that Mayor Bacher, I don't know if he's trying to pander to his base or his constituency.
Well, he doesn't want it north of North Springs.
But he's out of touch on this one, and I'm sure he's going to disagree with me. But he's got to join this religion that everyone's to do transit.
All right, we'll leave Mayor Bodker as an outlier for now, but I think there is some significance to it. When we come back, we're going to pivot in the general direction of the CDC and the State of the Union address. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
A sort of a strange story out of Atlanta this week involving a national figure, Brenda Fitzgerald, the head of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. She's known to Georgians as a longtime Republican activist, but also as, for a long time, the state's director of public health. And Alexis, she packed it in over the fact that in her investment portfolio were tobacco stocks.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, that was not her priority to be health conscious in her investments. She's more conscious about making money.
But I can't imagine that somebody who's a medical doctor and heading the CDC, a federal agency, and before that a state agency, would own tobacco stocks.
It doesn't make any sense.
There's got to be some other reason. Is this an investment made by an institution smoothing and blending a portfolio? I don't know. Carrie, what do you think?
Well, I will tell you that most of the investment advisors out there who are worth their salt will ask a customer before they make any investments, is there anything you want me to avoid? Such as tobacco stocks, gun stocks, you know, international arms manufacturers, things like that.
But one of the things that we also got to point out is that there's a trend here with Trump appointees, is that there's a lack of vetting. And I think that when you start making these positions, you start feeling...
I think didn't they catch it? Not to interrupt you, Theron, but I thought they caught it and she was supposed to divest it.
Right, and so, but my point is that when you are actually, you know, going through the process of vetting for a big, high-profile position like CDC Director, I'm sure it came up, but then also it becomes a point where really you think that you're maybe above the law and that you don't have to divest it. And so to Carrie's point, I think that the vetting process for these federal appointments, I mean, they had to say, all right, you got to disclose all this information. But for her not to act upon it while she's assuming the position, I think therein lies the thing that's kind of confusing about this whole situation.
It's just oddly underreported to me. It seems like there's more there that I don't understand.
There may be some more there that we don't know about. But basically, maybe she decided she didn't want to do the job. After
Well,
all,
I want to pivot to the State of the Union address and some of the Georgia angles on that. But I would say that the president, in his speech, especially that first 15 minutes, really hammered home the economy, and I thought he did it very effectively. And then this week, the Atlanta Fed, our own board of the Federal Reserve, projected 5.4% economic growth in the first quarter. Kerry, that is an astounding Reagan-esque sort of number.
Small government conservatives should get up and cheer. I mean, 5.4% is almost
If it happens, yeah.
3 times the economic growth that was experienced under the previous administration. And, you know, Ronald Reagan took over for Jimmy Carter, and he unleashed the economic power of the economy, and you saw surging growth under Reagan. Well, that same thing is happening now. You're seeing the same sort of deregulation, you're seeing tax cuts, and you're seeing the economy surge and enjoy meteoric growth. And I think that it is fantastic. It bodes well.
Darren, if we got 5.4% economic growth in the first quarter, what does that do to the midterm elections? I think that gives the Republicans a huge boost.
Well, it's not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say. Let's not also forget 2 things. Number one, this economic growth that we're seeing, and Kerry knows this, it's on the backs of the tremendous economic success that President Obama had in his outgoing in his administration.
Excuse me.
And then, hold on, and two, it's a big testament to local governments like the city of Atlanta, DeKalb. So it's not conservative small governments, because we reported that some of our so-called small conservative governments in other counties are actually not balancing their budgets pretty effectively. But yes, is it something that Republicans can hang their hat on to say, hey, we've worked with this president to try to increase the growth in our economy in the first quarter? Absolutely. But
Friday,
I'm sure.
Just Friday, another 200,000 new jobs.
But I think
it's happening, as Kerry said. It's
you're
happening.
right. But a lot of this is because the tough decisions that the Obama administration made and local and state governments made over a course of a few years before President Trump took office.
Driving here this morning, I heard a poll. Trump's approval rating 49%, disapproval rating 49%, as good as it's been since March of last
That's
year.
some fake news. I haven't heard that poll, Kerry.
I heard it.
Well, you
Well,
can see the CBS
driving
poll
in
of its
and
own
hot.
viewers, CBS poll, State of the Union viewers, 72% approval for the speech, not necessarily for the president, but for the speech.
But I think the president missed a key opportunity here in how he disrespected the Dreamers. He was going down a very patriotic, he wanted everyone to come together, and then I think his sort of stab at the Dreamers and was just really unfortunate.
But Americans are dreamers.
We all are dreamers, but we have a
Dreamers
particular
for it.
community of people
Right.
who are
And
contributing.
he's trying to
this.
fix that. The Democrats are starting it.
Well,
All right,
no. Well, excuse me. He was very divisive in his comments about immigration.
No, the
yes,
divisive people was John Lewis. He didn't even attend the speech. Talk about disrespect.
Well,
John
he didn't.
Lewis.
You know what, though, Congressman Lewis, if he was there, he would never yell out, "You a liar," "You lie,"
Well, that
like the
was years
Republicans
ago,
did.
and that
Yeah,
was
but my point is this:
that was
one
people guy.
Republican.
yeah,
not the
but all it
Republicans.
takes is one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we got to get
Right.
out. Boy, that's a scab. We don't want to do it. Let's not do that. It's been a nice, pleasant broadcast. All right, when we return, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I'm going to begin with Alexis. And Alexis, last week I startled you
Yes.
when you were plugging the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival.
Right.
And I used that ancient joke, funny, you don't look Jewish.
Yes, and I was
We
totally
didn't have time to
flustered.
get into it, did we?
No, we didn't.
Well, apparently some black folks are upset over that comment, which I don't get because it's a Jewish joke. And by the way, just because people did complain and I was startled that they complained,
Yeah.
if you Google funny, you don't look Jewish, there are 121 million citations on Google.
My goodness.
It's a staple of Jewish humor.
Well, there
Goes
you
back
go.
to Dean Martin and Sammy Davis
So,
Jr.
Dick, is this your way of apologizing to Alexis?
No, I'm not apologizing for the remark. I thought it was hilarious, but it offended a few people. All right, what you got?
It certainly threw me, but
It was the
we're
timing
good.
of it that threw you,
yeah,
not the line.
Right. What I want to do is congratulate Stacey Abrams. She reported her financing report, and she's now up to $2.2 million raised, which is really good for a Democratic candidate in a red state at this point.
Casey Cable's at 7.
Yeah, he's at 7,
Yeah.
but that's not surprising because he's a Republican in a red state and he's been in office for quite some time and intending to do this.
Yep.
And also I want to call attention to Go Red for Women. Friday was the day that all women were urged to wear red to call attention to cardiovascular
Which is
disease.
why you wore red to tape.
That's right, exactly right. And women present heart attacks differently from men, so you need to be conscious of what you can do to protect yourself. And then finally, February is Black History Month. So stand by for news you didn't know you didn't know, and news you want to
All right,
know.
we got to hurry now.
Sorry.
Carrie.
I have 2 winners. My first is Sandra Deal, the First Lady of the state of Georgia.
Yes.
Ms. Deal, during an annual mammogram, was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. It was caught early, and her prognosis is positive, but she used it as a learning moment and advised teaching moment, and advised all women to go out and do what she did, get an annual mammogram so that you can catch it early and so they can be effectively treated. My second winner, and asserting a point of personal privilege, I would name as my other winner 12-year-old Catherine Blair Ichter, who in her first quarter of middle school made the honor roll.
There you go.
Well
You
done,
got the
Blair.
personal privilege quickly there.
Real quick, Fulton County Solicitor Keith Gamage, who's a young bright star, did a very good thing this past weekend, doing a restorative program for small crime offenders and trying to get them back in the economy. So I just want to give him a big shout out for having some compassion for these sort of small crime people who.
He's a new dad too.
Yeah, and
We got to get out. We got to get out. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.